What if the Mafia boss who saved your kidnapped sister is the one who hired the kidnappers? Alina's world shatters when a rival shows her photos of her billionaire boss meeting with the very man who took her sister. The enemy claims Cassian orchestrated the entire $500 Siron ransom just to play the hero and win her loyalty. Is the Banshees falling for her savior, or the ultimate criminal mastermind who used her family as bait? Welcome to the Midnight Hour. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, sitting alone in the dark, I want you to picture Alina Voss. She stood trembling in the private closet of the most dangerous man in Chicago. For 8 long months, she was the perfect secretary, completely invisible, untouchable, burying her own heartbeat. But tonight, the terror finally won. Her 19-year-old sister was gone, swallowed by monsters demanding $500,000. When Cassian Roar opened that door, finding his expensive suit soaked in her mascara and silent tears, everything shifted. He just stared with those cold, gray eyes and asked, "Who took her?" Earlier, her hands had gripped his mahogany desk for 6 grueling hours, answering calls without a single waver. That was the one rule she lived by. Never let him see you break. We all wear armor. Well, most of us do anyway, but it shatters when the ones we love are threatened. At 3:47 p.m., a message arrived that tore her world apart. A photo of her sweet sister bound and blindfolded, with 3 sickening words. "You have 48 hours." Alina locked herself in the restroom, staring at her reflection until she became a stranger. Then she drifted past the guards in tailored suits and slipped into the one forbidden room, his private closet. It sounds absurd, but it was dark, quiet, and smelled of cedar. For 30 seconds, she just needed to vanish. Then the ugly, choking sobs ripped out of her chest. She buried her face in his charcoal jacket, terrified of making a single sound. Little Nessa, only 19, kidnapped because their father could not conquer his gambling demons, even as sickness took his life. He died 3 months ago, leaving behind dirty debts. Alina hoped the ledger was wiped clean. But the hardest lesson in life is that the past never buries its dead. Suddenly, the door swung open. Alina froze, the fabric pressed to her lips. Cassian stood in the doorway, a towering shadow against the harsh lights. He was 6'3", bearing the brutal beauty of a fallen king. He wore power like a suffocating cologne. The silence was absolute. He looked at her like a broken puzzle. "Miss Voss." His voice came out dangerously quiet. "What are you doing in my closet?" Alina tried to speak, but terror swallowed her words. She stood red-eyed and shaking, hiding in his wardrobe. "I am so sorry." Her voice cracked. "I will go." As she rushed past, his hand shot out, catching her wrist to anchor her. "Try again," he murmured. She looked into those storm-gray eyes and caught a flicker of something rare, concern. "It is personal," she lied. "It will not affect my work." His thumb brushed her racing pulse. "You are crying in my closet at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. It is already affecting your work." She was so tired of pretending she could carry the world entirely alone. "They took my sister," she whispered into the dark space between them. "Men sent me a photo. They want $500,000. His expression remained carved from stone, but his tight grip subtly shifted. The truth spilled out like a shattered dam. "It is my father's debt. I thought it was over. I do not even have 50,000, let alone $500,000. She was falling apart, drowning in absolute panic. Then Cassian did something that made her mind completely short-circuit. He pulled her flush against his chest. It was not a gentle embrace, but a decisive anchor in the storm. One hand wrapped her trembling shoulders, the other cradled her head, burying her tears in his shirt. "Breathe," he commanded softly. Slow, in through your nose. She tried and failed. Again. He guided, tracing slow circles against her spine. She focused on the steady, grounding rhythm of his heartbeat until the choking sobs finally faded. He did not pull away. "Show me the message," he said quietly. Her trembling fingers pulled up the grim image of her bound sister. She watched his face as he scanned the screen. All humanity vanished from his features. "When?" he asked. 3:47. He handed the phone back, his palm returning to her spine, the only force keeping her upright. "Who knew about this debt?" she explained, finding the betting slips after the funeral. How her calls met with dead silence. "I thought they wrote it off," she choked out. "How much, originally?" he pressed. 200,000. She could not speak the final sum. 500,000. Cassian finished the dark math. They took her sister as collateral. Alina nodded against his solid chest, feeling a sudden, heavy shift in his breathing. It was the unmistakable shift of a man making a dangerous choice. "Come with me." He guided her past his armed guards, leading her into his private office. He sat her down and poured a heavy glass of whiskey. "I do not drink," she whispered. "Tonight you do," he replied, pressing the glass into her trembling hands. It burned like fire, but the harsh warmth finally grounded her. "I will ask questions, and you will answer honestly. Does anyone else know about this?" She shook her head. Nessa was all she had left in this cruel world. "Who have you told about working here?" The inquiry caught her off guard. "Just my sister and a few old friends. Why?" Cassian's gaze darkened with a cold, terrifying realization. "Because whoever took her knows exactly who you work for." Cassian leaned against his desk. "This is not about your father's debt anymore." Alina's stomach plummeted. 200,000 does not become 500,000 in 3 months. They are inflating the number because they know I will pay it. She stared at him, completely bewildered. Why would a kingpin pay a secretary's ransom? His eyes flickered with something terrifyingly dark and possessive. "Because for the past 8 months," his deep voice dropped, "I have been watching you." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "You arrive at exactly 7:52. You take the red line home, always in the 3rd car. You visit your sister on Sundays." Alina's blood ran ice cold. "How do you know all that?" He did not even blink. "Because I made it my business to know. Picture this. You and I watching from the shadows of that dimly lit office." He pushed off the heavy mahogany desk, closing the distance between them. "Because the first day you walked in here," he murmured, his voice thick with a dangerous vulnerability, "you looked at me like I was a man, not a monster. I haven't stopped thinking about you since." Alina froze, the air trapped in her lungs. Cassian crouched, forcing her to look him in the eye. "Someone is watching you too," he warned her. "They took your sister for leverage. For control." When she whispered that she was just a secretary, not worth $500,000, a dark shadow crossed his face. He gently cupped her jaw. "Don't tell me what you are worth. You have no idea." Sometimes, the people who value us the most are the ones we least expect. The heavy office door burst wide open. Ronan Vale stood there gasping, looking like he had just sprinted up 6 flights of stairs. "We have a problem," he said. "Mikhail Draven is at the door with 8 men. Not a social call. I mean, just imagine the chill that hit the room." Alina watched Cassian shut down, his face turning into a mask of cold stone. He ordered her into the secure room immediately. With trembling legs, she asked who Draven was. "The man who took your sister," Cassian replied, before vanishing into the hall. Ronan locked her inside a windowless, concrete box of a room. She sat on the couch, fighting the urge to be sick. It is a harsh truth, but sometimes The most terrifying monsters are the ones walking around with human names. Have you ever waited for a text that could completely shatter your world? Alina grabbed her phone with shaking hands, expecting a ransom demand. Instead, a message from an unknown number read, "Ask him about the Treaty of St. James. Ask him what he traded for peace." She paced that room for 20 agonizing minutes, imagining her sister alone. When the door finally unlocked, Cassian stepped in, looking like he had aged 5 years. A fresh cut marked his brow, his knuckles torn raw. He downed a glass of whiskey in one motion. "Draven confirmed he has Nessa," Cassian said, his jaw locked tight. "He wants to negotiate." Alina immediately offered everything she owned. It is a quiet tragedy, how quickly we surrender all we have for the people we love. "He does not want your money," Cassian said, the absolute chill in his voice freezing her blood. "He wants $500,000 in cash, the South Side ports, and one night alone with you." Alina practically stopped breathing. She whispered a terrified refusal, but Cassian slammed his glass down hard enough to crack the thick crystal. "I told him to go to hell," Cassian growled. "I told him I would burn his entire empire down and make him watch." He stepped closer, the raw fury in his eyes barely contained. "You are not a bargaining chip. You are mine." That dark possessiveness really should have terrified her. Instead, it lit a desperate fire in her chest. She asked him why he cared so much. True devotion rarely asks for permission. It simply steps in to shield us from the storm. He stood so close she could feel the heat rolling off his skin, tracing her jaw with just his fingertips. "Because I have spent my entire life building walls," he confessed quietly, "and you walked through them like paper." Then he laid his soul bare. He told her about being 15, forced to watch rivals beat his mother to death, while he stood by, helpless and weak. He swore that day to never care about anything he could not control. "But then you showed up," he whispered, "and looked at me like I could be a good man." He admitted to building his empire on blood and fear, doing unforgivable things. Yet, looking into her eyes, he desperately wanted to be better. Healing begins the moment someone sees the light inside us, even when we are convinced there is only darkness left. Let us pause right here for a second. You and I have probably both faced a moment where trusting a dangerous person felt like the only choice. Alina reached up, covering his bruised knuckles. "Then be that man," she told him. "Help me save my sister." Cassian promised he would, but he needed her complete trust. She knew she should walk away, but Nessa was out of time. When she whispered yes, his eyes darkened. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers, just breathing her in. "I am taking you home with me," he declared. "Draven knows where you live. You are not safe there." It was happening so fast, faster than her mind could process. Welcome to his world. Sometimes the most dangerous storms are the only places we find genuine shelter. The penthouse was perched 43 floors above the city, a sprawling castle of glass, steel, and cold money. Cassian guided her inside, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. She tried not to stare at the imported marble and modern art that cost more than she would ever earn in a lifetime. "Guest room is down the hall," he told her, pulling out his phone. When she nervously asked what happens next, his answer was simple. He was going to make some calls, find out where Draven was hiding Nessa, and get her back. Alina demanded to know how. Cassian let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his dark hair. Draven ran a brutal syndicate in the industrial district. No matter how high we climb, or how thick the glass is, our past always finds a way to knock on the front door. "He has been trying to take over my territory for years," Cassian explained, his voice dipping into a dangerous low register. They had survived on mutually assured destruction, never touching each other's people. But by taking Nessa, Draven shattered those unwritten rules. "So what? You just go to war?" Alina asked, her voice trembling at the thought of the inevitable violence. "If I have to," he replied, as calmly as if he were ordering a late-night coffee. She blamed herself, terrified that people would die because of her. Cassian closed the distance, framing her face in his large, calloused hands. He made sure she knew this was Draven's greed, not her fault. Guilt is a heavy ghost, my friends, but true protectors will always step up to carry that weight, so we do not have to. Stick with me here, because this is where the past crashes into the present. "What is the Treaty of St. James?" Alina asked softly. Cassian froze. He stared at the text message on her screen, his features turning to solid granite. 5 years ago, his empire was bleeding out in a brutal street war with a rival family. They had a daughter, he admitted, his voice tightly controlled. "I married Katerina to stop the killing." Alina felt her stomach completely drop away. He was a widower. The marriage only lasted 6 months before her brakes failed. On a steep, icy highway, Cassian looked away, ghosts of his past swimming in his eyes. "It was not an accident," he whispered. "We try to bury our pain, forgetting that some secrets never truly die. They just patiently wait in the dark. Picture this. It is late, the kind of quiet that only comes when the world surrenders to sleep. You and I, we have both seen people at their breaking point, haven't we?" Cassian stands there, his hands balled into tight fists, carrying the heavy ghost of a political marriage. He confesses he felt relieved when his wife died, a dark truth that makes him feel like a monster. But Alina becomes a steady anchor in the dark. She tells him monsters do not hold people while they cry, and they do not look at someone with the soft, desperate care he shows her now. Suddenly, the sharp ring of a phone shatters the fragile moment. Cassian answers, his entire body going stiff as frozen iron. 10 seconds of tense silence pass before he promises to be there in 20 minutes. He hangs up, his eyes locking onto hers. They finally found Nessa in a heavily guarded Bridgeport warehouse. A massive wave of pure relief crashes over Alina. Cassian's voice turns to absolute ice. He knows it is a trap, that Draven is patiently waiting in the shadows. But love makes us reckless, doesn't it? That is the simple truth of the human heart. Alina refuses to back down, hot tears blurring her vision as she demands they save her sister. Cassian stares at her, weighing the terrible risks, before finally agreeing. He insists she stays hidden in the car, an unbending rule. She steps closer, begging him to bring her sister home. In response, Cassian tangles his hand in her hair and pulls her into a kiss. There is no gentle romance here. It is raw, desperate, tasting heavily of sharp whiskey and impending violence. He pulls her tight against his chest, swallowing her small gasp. When they finally break apart, the air between them is heavy and ragged. He tells her, his voice rough with emotion, that when they survive this night, they are going to have a very long talk about their future. She can only nod, her words completely lost. His thumb slowly traces her swollen lip as he begs her to simply stay alive. He offers a quick, dangerous smile that makes her heart skip a painful beat. Just like that, the quiet moment dies. He is moving, barking sharp orders over the phone. At the door, 4 heavily armed men wait, looking at Cassian as if he is about to march them straight into the fires of hell. The 18-minute drive to Bridgeport feels like an eternity. Sometimes, waiting is the heaviest burden we carry. Alina sits in the back of the dark vehicle, watching the city lights blur by, his grip on her hand never loosening. His orders are clear and final. She stays inside with Ronin, and if the bullets start flying, they leave him behind. He forces her to say she understands, his grip tightening. Up ahead, the crumbling brick warehouse emerges from the dark, guarded by fences and 3 black cars, bathing in harsh yellow light. Armed men linger near the gloomy entrance, casually smoking in the cold air. Victor, the stone-faced driver, kills the engine 30 yards out. Through the crackling radio, a scout confirms there are 8 visible guards, and Nessa is alive and unharmed on the 2nd floor. Cassian turns to Alina, offering a rare look of comfort. She is okay. Relief washes over her in a warm tide. He leaves Ronan with strict orders to pull Alina out if hell breaks loose. Listen closely, because this is where the tension truly snaps. Cassian gently cups her face, promising to bring her sister back before stepping out into the unforgiving night. 3 loyal men flank him as he marches toward the waiting guards. Weapons are quickly drawn, the heavy air thick with unspoken threats. One guard makes a frantic call, and 30 seconds later, Mikhail Draven steps out. Even from this far away, the man radiates a sickening danger, wearing a cruel smile that makes the skin crawl. Draven spreads his arms wide, a deeply mocking welcome. He trades sharp words with Cassian, then looks straight through the shadows at the parked vehicle, blowing a sickening kiss toward Alina. Disrespect has a way of turning a cold man into wildfire. Cassian lunges faster than a heartbeat. His fist shatters the stillness, connecting violently with Draven's jaw. Instantly, a dozen metal barrels are raised in the pale light. Inside the car, Ronan curses under his breath. Alina begs to intervene, but orders are absolute. Out on the grim street, the 2 men circle each other like starving wolves. Draven is smiling, his mouth moving in endless taunts, until he says a single phrase that freezes Cassian in place. Suddenly, Alina's phone vibrates. An unknown number reveals the dark truth. It is a terrifying offer of old-world justice. A brutal trial by combat. 1 fight, no rules, winner takes absolutely everything. Her heart flatlines in her chest. The winner's word becomes an absolute law. When Alina asks what happens to the loser, Ronin's grim silence is the only answer she needs. Out in the cold street, Cassian extends his hand, sealing his fate with a single, firm shake. He returns to the car, his face an unreadable mask of stone. The terms are terrifyingly simple. In 3 days, they will fight. If he wins, her sister walks free. If he loses, Draven takes his empire, and Alina loses her protection. Sometimes the ultimate sacrifice is the only currency love knows. She begs him to reconsider, but his mind is completely made up. When she asks what happens if he dies, he offers a sharp, bitter smile. He tells her he will die, knowing he tried to save the only woman he loves. That word hits her with the crushing weight of a heavy train. But the engine roars to life, and suddenly there are only 3 agonizing days left on the clock. 3 days until he saves them all, or she loses everything. The beautiful penthouse has become a gilded cage. You know that suffocating feeling, right? When the world keeps spinning while your life falls apart. Alina paces the cold marble floors, staring at the indifferent, glittering lights of Chicago, 43 stories below. She is trapped in silence, listening to the invisible clock ticking down to the moment Cassian might breathe his last. 72 hours. She checks her silent phone over and over. Cassian has been locked in his study for 2 hours, leaving her alone with his heavy words. He had said he loved her. He said it simply, as if her life was worth trading for his own. She presses warm hands against the freezing glass, undone by his devotion. Suddenly, the wooden door swings open. Cassian steps into the dim light. His tie is gone, his dark hair a messy tangle. looking completely broken by the road ahead. A fresh drop of red marks the small cut above his eye, irritated from him rubbing it in deep thought. He tells her she needs to rest, but the heavy irony is not lost on her. He pours 2 fingers of amber whiskey, knocking it back like a man trying to numb a fatal wound. His tone is terrifyingly casual, like a man discussing the evening weather, as he explains that his loyal men are tracking Draven's every shadow. If the man steps out of line, Cassian vows to bury him early. Alina crosses her arms, her voice shaking as she accuses him of throwing his life away in some ancient barbaric ritual. He slams his heavy glass onto the dark wood, the sharp noise echoing in the quiet room. He tells her this is the only way to truly protect her. As he steps closer, she finally sees it. Hidden beneath his fierce anger is a deep, profound exhaustion and a lingering shadow of real fear. He swears he will win, but the terrifying truth is that neither of them knows how this will end. Alina's voice broke, fragile as glass. She reminded him he was risking his survival against a man with absolutely nothing to lose. "What happens to you?" she whispered, terror choking her words. Hankarich yelched, his rough palm cradling her jaw, seeing right through her. "I am afraid of losing you," she confessed into the shadows. Something inside the hardened fighter finally cracked. "You barely know me," he murmured, but Alina knew enough. She knew how he held her broken pieces, how he waged war for her sister. She knew his kiss felt like salvation. When his mouth found hers again, it was a slow, searching plea, a man trying to memorize the only light left in his dark world. They broke apart, breathing hard. Let this remind us that true connection anchors us when we are closest to the edge. "I need to train," Cassian whispered, his voice heavy with the looming storm. Draven was younger and faster. He couldn't afford a single mistake. Alina gripped his shirt, desperate for an anchor. "Let me help. I cannot just sit here waiting for you to die." He studied the exhaustion on her face, finally yielding. "Tomorrow you help. Tonight you sleep. Try, for me." She let him guide her down the quiet hallway to a lavish guest room. Cassian paused at the door, reminding her he was just 2 doors down. She offered a fragile smile, praising his memory. "Occupational hazard," he replied with a bittersweet edge. "Executive secretaries remember everything. Are you still just my secretary?" The question hung in the midnight air, packed with unspoken truths. Sometimes the hardest questions are the ones we already know the answers to. She did not know how to answer. Let's pause right here. Have you ever felt that terrifying limbo of not knowing where you stand with someone? Alina admitted she didn't know what she was anymore. Cassian reached out, his knuckles grazing her cheek. "You are mine," he vowed. "That is all that matters." Then he vanished, leaving her to agonize over the violent ticking clock. Sleep never came. Morning crept in, cold and unforgiving. By 6, she found him in the kitchen, nursing black coffee and glaring at his phone with a quiet, lethal fury. She stood there in his oversized shirt, drawing a brief flicker of warm surprise from his tired eyes. The warmth died instantly. "Draven is playing games," Cassian growled, turning the screen toward her. A short nightmare played out. Nessa was bound and blindfolded in a damp basement, her voice trembling as she answered a faceless interrogator hiding off camera. The harsh voice on the recording demanded her sister's name. Nessa's trembling voice echoed in the quiet kitchen, explaining Alina was too busy taking care of her to ever date. The screen went black. Alina's hands shook uncontrollably. Cassian's face was carved from stone as he explained the twisted politics of his world. Draven needed to prove Cassian was fighting purely out of professional obligation, not personal love, just to avoid looking weak. "That is insanity," she breathed. No, Cassian replied, setting down his bitter coffee. That is politics. He ordered her to get dressed. He led her down to an underground facility secured by a heavy steel door. This wasn't a casual gym. It was a sanctuary of violence. Heavy bags, cold iron, and a scarred boxing ring dominated the room. In the corner, Ronan Vale battered a speed bag before pausing to greet them both. Clear the ring, Cassian ordered. He needed to test his limits. A flicker of concern crossed Ronan's stoic face, warning him that he hadn't sparred in months. Then I am terribly overdue, Cassian replied, shedding his shirt. Alina tried to look away, but the tragic history written on his skin held her captive. He was lean muscle wrapped in a road map of survival, a puckered bullet wound by his shoulder, a jagged slash across his ribs. He caught her staring at the endless damage. "Do you still think I am a monster?" he asked softly. "I think you are a survivor," she answered. A wave of raw, unguarded pain washed over his features before his icy focus locked back in. He climbed through the ropes, ordering Ronan to strike him hard enough to matter. He pointed to the edge of the ring, instructing Alina to sit and witness the brutal, unforgiving reality of what he was up against. Alina swallowed her protests and perched on the apron. The first punch was a blur. Ronan's jab snapped out, cracking against Cassian's jaw. His head whipped back, but he answered with a savage right hook. They circled like wolves. Ronan feinted, burying a fist deep into Cassian's ribs. Cassian absorbed the sickening thud, retaliating blindly. "You are too slow," Ronan warned. "Draven will not give you a second to breathe. Then make me faster." Cassian spat, wiping crimson from his torn lip. The violence quickly escalated. Alina watched in pure horror as Ronan dismantled him, landing crushing blows to his ribs and face. Cassian simply took the agonizing punishment, pushing forward like a man possessed. 20 minutes later, Cassian was bruised and bleeding heavily, while Ronan barely broke a sweat. "Enough." Alina's terrified voice shattered the heavy, violent silence. "We are not done," Cassian panted. "Yes, you are," she declared, stepping into the line of fire. "You cannot train if you are unconscious." She pressed his hand to his bleeding eyebrow. The feral heat slowly left his eyes. "Fine, a 20-minute break." "Tis," she counted. 30 minutes, 1 hour, final offer. A ghost of a smile tugged at his ruined mouth. "You drive a hard bargain." "It's an occupational hazard," she echoed. Ronan left to find ice, leaving them alone in the quiet ring. She guided Cassian to sit, her soft fingers mapping the fresh destruction on his face. Dark bruises were already blooming across his ribs. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are the ones we carry from a lifetime ago. She tilted his chin, her gaze shifting to the older, faded marks carved into his flesh. "What happened to you?" she whispered. Cassian fell completely silent. "The bullet found me at 19, he rasped. "A rival crew tried to erase me. The deep slash came later in a dirty knife fight." He covered her trembling hand with his own. "The smaller marks are from broken glass and rusted wire. I clawed my way out of the gutter." His dark eyes searched hers, bracing for judgment. "Do you understand what I had to become?" "I understand you are a man who has been deeply hurt," she murmured. "I know you are terrified of losing." He tried to deny it, but her voice held firm. "You are terrified Draven will win, Nessa will die, and I will forever hate you." Cassian's jaw clenched. "And what if I do fail?" Her hands gently framed his bruised face. "Then we find another way." "But you do not get to die for me, Cassian." "That is not how this works." "Then how does it work?" he asked, completely stripped of his armor. "You fight, and you win. And then we figure out what this is between us," he murmured, pulling her close. "What do you feel for me?" Alina's heart hammered. I feel like I have spent my life waiting for someone to actually see me, she confessed. Not the perfect secretary or the responsible sitter, just me. You see all my broken pieces and you never run away. Cassian's grip tightened fiercely. Because I am just as shattered, he whispered. She pressed her forehead to his. Perhaps that is exactly why this works. He kissed her then, a slow, tender promise tasting of bitter copper and desperate hope. Two fractured souls finding shelter in the dark. When Ronan returned with the ice, they pulled back, but Cassian's fingers stayed locked tight with hers. True love never demands perfection. It simply holds your hand through the healing. Stick with me, because the waiting is always the hardest part. The next 2 days dissolve into a grueling blur. Cassian trains like a man fighting a demon, pushing his battered body through 6 hours in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, and 2 more before bed. Alina stays by his side through every painful strike, learning how to wrap his bruised knuckles, pressing ice into his swelling flesh. She sits awake with him at 3 in the morning when the dark terrors pull him from sleep. They never speak of losing. On the second night, right at the stroke of midnight, her phone lights up. A mysterious woman with a thick accent speaks through the static. She calls to offer a deadly warning. The fight is meant to be clean, but Draven is placing armed men in the shadows. If he begins to lose, his men will slaughter Cassian. When Alina asks why a stranger would risk giving her this secret, the bitter voice replies that her hatred for Draven runs deeper. And your sister does not deserve to bleed for your father's mistakes. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a frantic warning from an informant. The line went dead. Alina sprinted down the hall. Cassian was hunched over blueprints of the warehouse where the blood match would happen. "We have a problem," she gasped, detailing the trap. Draven was stacking the deck with hidden gunmen. Cassian slammed his fist down. "He knows I must come alone. Trial by combat, one-on-one." His laugh echoed like broken glass. "Honor among thieves, what an absolute joke. If he brought his crew, he broke the syndicate rules, handing Draven the Empire. But walking in alone was a guaranteed death sentence. Let me ask you this, dear listener. When every single path leads to a grave, what do you choose?" Alina stood there, her sharp mind desperately racing for a way out. Welcome back, Night Owls. You and I are going to unpack a moment where desperation turns into a deadly gamble. Alina pitched a wild idea to expose Draven to all the Chicago factions. To ruin his name meant catching his crew red-handed. So she offered the ultimate sacrifice, volunteering to be the bait. You know, love often makes us offer our own throats to the blade just to save someone else. Cassian refused instantly, his chest heaving with the raw dread of losing her. But Alina grabbed his shirt, forcing him to face the brutal truth. If he died alone in that warehouse, she and Nessa were dead anyway. Cassian covered her hands, his voice breaking under the heavy burden of his fear. "I cannot lose you," he whispered. She pulled his face down, resting her forehead against his in the quiet dark. "Then do not," she told him. "Fight smart. Win dirty if you have to, but win." Cassian finally exhaled, surrendering to her plan. When morning broke, the air was bitter cold. Alina woke to an empty bed and a written warning not to be foolish. Soon, Ronan walked in with coffee and a face carved from stone. He told her they were out of their minds. But here is a simple truth. Sometimes madness is the only way out of the dark. Ronan knew that ruining Draven would reduce him to just a street thug. Still, his eyes held deep worry as he demanded she follow his orders if the trap failed. Alina met his weary gaze and gave her word. He handed her the hot cup, urging her to drink up. When noon arrived, Cassian walked back through those doors, his body wound up tight like a loaded spring. Cassian, dressed in pitch black, slowly inspecting his guns with Victor. Alina watched, a sickening knot tight in her gut. Terrified, she admitted when he asked. He told her fear was a good thing. We often forget that fear is just the soul's way of keeping us alive when the wolves circle. He strapped a blade to his ankle, ordering her to run without looking back if gunfire started. She breathed his name, and instantly he was holding her face in his large hands. He kissed her with an aching fire, confessing his love in case he never got another chance. She gripped his shirt like a lifeline, swearing he would win so they could finally plan their future. He offered a fierce, fleeting smile. Soon, the crumbling brick warehouse loomed under the gray daylight. Dozens of heavy cars sat waiting outside. The entire Chicago underworld was already gathered there, hungry for blood. Stick with me, because this is where the air turns to ice. Alina sat in the heavy car, watching Cassian approach the doors. He moved like a solitary wolf, carrying a deadly calm. 8 guards parted to let him inside. 20 minutes until it begins, Ronan muttered. You know, waiting is always the most agonizing part of survival. Alina counted every heartbeat, staring at the dark windows. 15 minutes bled by before her phone buzzed. A message confirmed 3 armed men on the 2nd floor. Draven was cheating. Ronan keyed his radio, sending his crew to clear the snipers. Through the glass, Alina watched 4 shadows melt into the alley. 5 tense minutes passed before the radio cracked alive. The threats were neutralized, and they had the video proof. Ronan exhaled deeply. But right then, a massive crash echoed from inside the building. Shouting erupted, followed by a chilling silence. The fight started early. Ronan barked, throwing his door open and ordering her to stay put. Like hell she would. She refused to sit safely while the man she loved bled. Blamed. Sometimes true love demands we walk straight into the slaughterhouse. Ronan cursed, but could not stop her. They sprinted toward the warehouse, the noise swelling into a demonic roar. Inside, the chaos was suffocating. A crude ring sat in the center, encircled by rich mobsters acting like ancient Romans at a death match. Cassian and Draven were tearing each other apart. Draven was a massive giant with cruel grace. He landed a sickening blow that snapped Cassian's head backward, spraying dark blood. The crowd howled in delight. But Cassian swallowed the deep agony, launching a brutal uppercut that lifted the heavy giant right off his feet. Alina desperately shoved her way through the frantic mob. Ronan followed closely as the brutal spectacle came into full view. The air was thick with the copper stench of blood. Draven slammed a heavy knee into Cassian's ribs, unleashing a flurry of fists that trapped him against the ropes. He is losing, Alina whispered in panic. No, Ronan replied tightly. He is surviving. Watch. You see, sometimes you must weather a brutal storm before you can unleash the lightning. Cassian absorbed the crushing blows, guarding his vitals, waiting for a mistake. Suddenly, Draven threw a wild, careless punch. Cassian slit the guard, driving a vicious elbow straight into his throat. The giant choked. Cassian seized his hair, smashing his face into his knee twice. Dark blood sprayed the mat. That is for taking her sister, Cassian snarled, hurling the massive man across the ring. But as Draven hung bleeding on the worn ropes, a sick smile spread across his face. Draven had blood on his teeth and madness in his eyes. He raised a hand, and from the balcony, deafening gunfire erupted. Panic is a wild animal that spares no one. The crowd scattered as bullets shredded the ring, but the snipers were not aiming at Cassian. They were aiming at Alina. Ronan tackled her hard as the wall behind them exploded. Through the choking smoke, Alina saw Cassian rise. She saw the soul-crushing terror on his battered face when he looked at her. Then she saw the Grim Reaper right behind him. A guard raised a pistol at Cassian's blind back. Alina didn't hesitate. She ripped Ronin's backup gun from his ankle, aimed her trembling hands, and fired. The savage recoil almost snapped her wrist. The wild shot missed, but it made the guard flinch. It bought Cassian the single second he needed. He spun around, firing 3 ruthless shots that dropped the man dead. Then, silence swallowed the room. Cassian stood tall in the bloody center of the ring. Draven was on his knees, dark blood pouring from his broken face. "Yield," Cassian commanded, his voice dead quiet. Draven just spat crimson and cursed him. Instantly, Cassian's hand shot out, locking around the fallen giant's throat. "Yield or die," he growled. It is a terrifying thing to hold another man's final breath in your bare hands. For a long, agonizing moment, Draven stared into the abyss of Cassian's eyes. Finally, he whispered his surrender. Cassian dropped him and turned to the shadows where the faction bosses were emerging with drawn guns. Draven violated the sacred terms of combat. Cassian's deep voice boomed. He planted hidden gunmen. He broke our oldest law. A voice demanded proof. Right on cue, Victor stepped into the light, holding up his phone. He played the clear video of Draven's hidden snipers waiting for the kill order. Instantly, the crowd's whispers turned into a violent rumble. "We are near the end of tonight's tale, listeners." The crowd turned completely against the fallen giant. "Draven is a cheat," they shouted. "Worse than a cheat," Cassian's voice sliced through the room. "He is a coward." Cassian looked down at his enemy, who knelt in his own blood. "You lose everything today," Cassian declared. "Your territory, your reputation. And Nessa Voss goes free right now." Draven's face twisted with pure rage, but his empire was ashes. "Where is she?" Cassian roared. Draven unleashed a broken, bitter laugh. In the basement he choked out, spitting blood. "Enjoy the crown. It will not last." Cassian sent Victor down to find her. Then, leaving the ruined king behind, he walked straight through the carnage to Alina. She was still trembling on the cold floor, clutching the gun. Cassian dropped to his knees. His face was a brutal, bloody mess, but his hands were incredibly gentle as he took the weapon away. "You saved my life," Cassian whispered, his voice heavy in the quiet room. "I missed. You made him flinch. That is all I needed." Picture this, his rough hands framing Alina's face. "I am terrified," she breathed. He pulled her against his chest, and holding her like his only anchor, down in that cold basement, they found Nessa, battered but breathing. When Victor sliced her bonds, her first word was her sister's name. Alina dropped to her knees, pulling her close. Nessa's terrified eyes darted to the armed men, and finally to Cassian, standing in the doorway, blood painting his face, a cold shadow in his eyes. "What is going on?" Nessa choked out. Alina just held her tight as the shock set in. "You know, folks, sometimes the only answer we can give to the absolute chaos of this world is simply holding on to the ones we love." Over Nessa's shoulder, Alina caught Cassian's gaze. He looked at her like she was the only light left in a ruined world. Right then, a cold truth settled into her bones. She had crossed an invisible line, fired a weapon, and stepped right into his violent orbit. Hours later, the hospital room smelled of harsh antiseptic and lingering fear. Alina watched her sister sleep. Nessa was pale, hollowed out by 4 days of terror, heavy bandages wrapping her raw wrists. She was safe, but Alina could not close her own eyes. Every time she blinked, she felt the heavy steel of that gun. She felt the vicious recoil rattling up her arms, heard the sharp crack of the bullet meant to end a life. She missed, but she pulled the trigger. It is a heavy thing, realizing that the darkest shadows of the world can so quickly take root inside your own heart. That dark truth refused to leave her. The door clicked open and Cassian slipped inside. His face was a tragic canvas of bruises, his left eye swollen shut, his split lip glued together. Every step looked like pure agony, but he walked to her, a warm coffee cup into her freezing hands. He sat close, lacing his battered fingers through hers. Alina stared at his raw, bleeding knuckles, tracing one with a trembling thumb. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Everything hurts," so softly, "but we won." "We almost died," she whispered, fear thick in her throat. Cassian stroked her wrist, his voice dropping to a low, desperate rumble. "You saved my life tonight. If you had not fired, I would be gone." You made him hesitate. And sometimes, my friends, a single second of hesitation is the only difference between a tragedy and a tomorrow. Cassian kissed her scraped knuckles. "You are braver than you think," he murmured. "I am terrified," she confessed. He gave a sad, knowing smile. "That is exactly what makes it brave." In the bed, Nessa stirred, and they held their breath until she slipped back under the heavy sedatives. "What are we going to tell her?" Alina asked. "The truth," Cassian replied. Alina shook her head, fearing her sister would look at her like a stranger. "She should know you walked through hell for her," he insisted. Alina hugged herself tight. "I do not feel like I made it out," she whispered. Cassian walked to the window, watching the pale dawn bleed over the Chicago skyline. "When I was 15, he began, his voice heavy with old grief. "I watched my mother die. What I never told you is that I killed the men who did it. We all carry ghosts, but some of us have to make them ourselves just to survive the night." Alina's breath caught. "It took me 2 years to hunt them down," Cassian said, staring at the window. 5 men. I was 17 when I shot the last one." He did not look at her. "I thought revenge would cure the poison in my chest. It did not. It just showed me I was capable of dark things." He turned, eyes burning with a fierce fire. "You fired a weapon tonight, and you wonder if that makes you a monster. It does not. It proves you love your sister enough to do the unthinkable." "What if I had killed him?" she choked out. "Then you would have killed him," he said, crouching eye to eye. "And I would still be here. I would still love you." Alina's eyes filled with hot tears. "How can you be so sure?" "Because," he whispered, framing her face, "I have spent 15 years believing my own sins made me entirely unlovable. True love does not run from the dark. It sits beside you in it. You and I know that the darkest nights force us into the arms of what we used to fear. Then you looked at me like I was worth saving, like all the blood on my hands didn't matter," Cassian whispered. "If you can do that for me, I can sure still hell do it for you." She kissed him hard, tasting coffee, copper, and salvation. When they broke apart, Alina asked, "What happens now?" "Now we go home," he replied softly. "We let Nessa heal. We figure out what normal looks like." 6 hours later, the hospital released her. Victor drove them through the sleeping city. The silence in the car heavy and suffocating. Stepping into the sprawling penthouse, Nessa just stood there, staring blankly, like a lost soul washed up on an alien shore. Nessa stood frozen, scanning the cold luxury of the room. "This is where you live?" she asked, demanding to know exactly what he was. Before Alina could spin a protective lie, Cassian poured a whiskey and offered the bleeding truth. "I run an organization that operates outside the law," he confessed. "I'm not a good man, Nessa, but I love your sister, and I will burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt her or you." The air grew still. Nessa looked at her sister. "You're in love with him." Alina's throat tightened as she admitted it. Nessa let out a brittle, empty laugh, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Great foundation for a relationship," she mocked, trying to hide how much her world was falling apart. Sometimes, the people we try hardest to protect are the ones who bleed the most. My sister's dating Chicago's scariest crime lord, and I got kidnapped because of it, Nessa muttered. Normal Tuesday. Retreating to the guest room, she collapsed on the bed. Alina stood in the doorway, her apologies falling like broken glass. But Nessa turned, tears carving paths down her pale cheeks. Everything you tried to protect me from, it found me anyway, she cried, describing the suffocating dark of the basement, wondering if Alina would just cut her losses and run. Alina felt those words shatter her ribs, swearing she would do anything to save her. You did do anything, Nessa fired back. You became someone I don't even recognize. I'm still your sister, Alina pleaded, but Nessa just turned her face to the cold wall, begging for sleep to erase the nightmare. Alina stepped out into the hall with a completely shattered heart. Cassian was waiting in the dim light. He did not say a word, just pulled her into his chest as she fought back her tears. She hates me, Alina whispered. Cassian held her tighter. She's scared. There's a difference. He told her that forgiveness takes time, and sometimes you just have to carry the guilt until they are ready. 3 long days slipped away in a heavy, suffocating silence. Nessa remained locked away, barely touching her meals, while Alina kept trying to reach out, desperately hoping to mend the tragic chasm between them. Nessa sat there, offering only one-word answers, and eyes so hollow they looked like abandoned rooms. On the 4th day, Alina's phone shattered the quiet, an unknown number. You and I both know that gut instinct to just let it ring, but she answered. The man's voice was smooth, like expensive bourbon. He claimed to be an old friend of Male Draven, back before Cassian Roar ruined him. He wanted to meet at Navy Pier. He promised the truth about her sister and the secrets Cassian was keeping. Alina stared at the dead phone. Trust is a fragile thing, my friends. Once doubt is planted, every shadow becomes a monster. Remembering the treaty of St. James, Cassian's dead wife, and all his unspoken sins, she grabbed her heavy coat and walked out into the cold. Navy Pier was freezing at 2 in the afternoon. Alina walked past the tourists, heading to the edge where the grey water stretched forever. A tall man stood by the railing, maybe 60 years old. Silver hair, the kind of face that crushes dreams in corporate boardrooms. You have 60 seconds, she fired back. He introduced himself as Marcus Kane, a shadow player in Chicago. He offered a hand she refused to take. Kane didn't flinch. He told her Male Draven was a pawn, and the true architect of her sister's nightmare was someone much closer to home. Alina felt her blood freeze. Life teaches us a harsh truth, my friends. The deepest wounds always come from the hands we choose to hold. Kane claimed Cassian Roar needed a reason to destroy Draven, and simply manufactured one. Kane pulled out his phone, the screen glowing like a warning beacon. It showed a photo taken 3 weeks before the nightmare began. Cassian, standing in a dim parking garage with Male Draven. Alina blinked, desperate for her eyes to be lying, but timestamps do not lie. 2 weeks prior, Cassian handing Draven a file. 1 week prior, the men shaking hands. Alina's fingers began to tremble. The truth is a heavy burden. We build beautiful monuments to the people we love, only to watch a single image tear them all down. Kane's voice was merciless. He explained how Cassian paid Draven to take her sister, scripting the ransom and the bloody trial to steal Draven's empire while playing the hero. No, Alina whispered, shaking her head as her reality shattered into a million jagged pieces. No, you're lying. Alina's voice was barely a whisper, yet it felt like glass shattering. Kane's response was gentle, the kind of soft, terrifying gentleness a predator uses to soothe its prey. "Am I?" he asked, his voice smooth like dark honey. "Think about it, Alina. How did Draven know you mattered to Cassian? Because Cassian handed your sister's life over on a silver platter. You and I both know how poison works. It doesn't kill immediately, it seeps into the bloodstream. Cain was injecting that poison, telling her that Cassian only loved power, that he engineered this entire tragedy just to play the hero and crush a rival. The tragedy of it all? The best lies are built on a foundation of undeniable truth, leaving us to question everyone we love." Cain walked away, leaving Alina anchored to the freezing pier. The icy lake wind cut through her coat, but it was nothing compared to the chill devouring her soul. She walked the frozen streets, back to the penthouse numb, moving on sheer autopilot. When she pushed open the study door, Cassian was right where she left him, a warm smile breaking across his face. But Alina couldn't smile. Her voice shook with the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. "Did you know Mikhail Draven before Nessa was taken?" The warmth drained from Cassian's eyes instantly. He stood up slowly, the silence in the room stretching into something unbearable. When he finally answered yes, the floor completely dropped out from beneath her. 5 years of shadow dealings finally dragged into the bitter light. Cassian went entirely still, the posture of a man bracing for a fatal blow. When she told him Marcus Cain had provided the photos, he cursed, running trembling hands through his hair. He listened as Alina's voice broke, accusing him of orchestrating the kidnapping to steal Draven's territory. Desperation clawed at his chest as he looked at the images on her phone. Yes, they were real, but not for the sinister reasons she believed. "I was trying to buy your father's debt," he confessed, the words raw and bleeding. Her father, a man whose reckless choices had cast a long, dark shadow over his daughters' lives, turning them into collateral damage in a brutal underworld. Cassian had secretly tried to pay off the sins of the father to save the daughter he cherished. But Draven refused. Draven knew exactly what Alina meant to Cassian, so he weaponized that love, inflating the price and demanding territory. When negotiations failed, Draven took Nessa as the ultimate bargaining chip. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alina cried, her voice echoing with the agony of betrayal. Cassian's ironclad composure finally shattered into a million pieces. He confessed his hidden obsession, how he had been watching her, desperately trying to shield her from a violent darkness she didn't belong in. But to Alina, his protection felt like a prison. He had stalked her, learned her every move, manipulated her reality. The heartbreaking truth we often forget is that when love is driven by pure fear, our desperate attempts to protect someone can ultimately become the very thing that destroys them. Tears streamed freely down Alina's face as the crushing guilt consumed her. Her sister was tortured because Cassian had decided Alina was worth destroying empires over. "I love you," he pleaded, reaching out for her, but she stepped back, recoiling from his touch. Did he love her, or just the fantasy he had built? A perfectly crafted illusion of a secretary who looked past the monster to see the man. Alina's heart was tearing at the seams. She needed space, needed to untangle what was genuine affection from what was calculated manipulation. "Please, just let me go," she sobbed, the sound completely breaking him. Cassian stared at her, an ocean of regret in his dark eyes, before slowly nodding. Sometimes the heaviest burden of true love is knowing when to let someone walk out the door. 20 minutes later, the glittering skyline of the penthouse was behind them. Alina and Nessa rode in dead silence back to Logan Square, retreating to the cramped, Familiar safety of Alina's tiny studio apartment. The moment the deadbolt clicked shut, the nervous pacing began. Alina spilled everything, her voice trembling as she recounted the poisoned seeds Marcus Kane had planted in her mind. Had Cassian orchestrated the entire nightmare to steal her territory? Or was he telling the truth about trying to quietly resolve the crushing debt their dead father had left behind? The ghost of their father's failures still haunted them, dictating their lives from beyond the grave. It is a painful reality that we inherit the wreckage of the people who raised us, forced to pay debts we never owed. Maybe he didn't want to scare you, Nessa suggested softly, watching her sister unravel. Alina was utterly lost, drowning in the terror that she was nothing but a pawn in a billionaire's bloody chess game. Nessa moved closer, her voice dropping to a somber whisper. She told Alina about the dark, damp basement where Draven's men tortured her mind. They had forced her to watch surveillance footage of Alina's daily life, proving they could strike at any moment. But one video stood out from the terror. It was footage of Cassian finding Alina crying in his office closet. Nessa looked deeply into her sister's panicked eyes. She saw Cassian holding Alina, tracing her face with pure, unmasked devastation. It was not the cold manipulation of a mob boss. It was the raw agony of a man in love. Because that is exactly how you look at him, too, Nessa said gently, reaching out to hold her sister's trembling hand. Nessa confessed her own quiet resentments. How angry she had been that Alina put herself in the crossfire, trying to clean up the catastrophic mess their father left behind. But seeing Alina walk out of that collapsing warehouse, covered in dust and holding a gun, changed everything. The innocent girl was gone, replaced by a fierce, dangerous survivor. Listen to me. Change isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it's the armor we need to survive the brutal wars we never asked to fight. Nessa urged her not to throw away a genuine, profound love just because a rival planted seeds of doubt. If Cassian was truly trying to save her, walking away would be a lifelong regret. You spend your entire life following the rules, playing it safe, carrying the heavy burdens of the past. Falling for a dangerous kingpin was the first truly reckless thing Alina had ever done, and perhaps it was exactly what she needed. Suddenly, the fragile quiet was shattered. Alina's phone buzzed violently, a desperate warning from Ronin. Draven's men were attacking the penthouse. Before the blood could even freeze in her veins, her own apartment door exploded inward with a deafening crash. 3 masked gunmen swarmed the tiny room. Alina shoved Nessa behind her, feral instincts taking over. She fought back with everything Cassian had taught her, driving her elbow into a man's ribs, fighting for their lives until another attacker slammed her brutally against the cold plaster wall. White-hot pain exploded through Alina's shoulder. Nessa's raw scream ripped through the room. Alina watched her sister fight desperately before a heavy gun crashed across her face, sending her to the floor. Alina lunged, but cold steel slammed against her throat, jerking her back. "Enough," a voice echoed. Marcus Kane stepped into the chaos, his suit untouched by the violence. "You should have walked away," he murmured. When Alina choked out that he had lied about Cassian, his smile turned to ice. "Here is a brutal lesson, my friends. The greatest weakness a person can carry is a heart that loves too deeply. Cassian loves you," Kane whispered, "making you the perfect leverage to steal his empire." He calmly ordered his men to take them both, ready for the bloody war that Cassian would bring to his door. You and I know that watching someone you love suffer shatters you worse than any bullet. They dragged Alina and Nessa into a van. Alina fought, screaming into the empty night, until a heavy blow turned the world grey. The last thing she saw was her phone on the floor, a text glowing in the dark. Then, nothing. She woke up to screaming pain. Her hands were tied behind her, the rough rope biting deep into her wrists. She forced her eyes open to cold concrete and a swinging bulb. Nessa lay beside her, blood on her temple. Alina desperately begged her to wake up. When Nessa opened terrified eyes and asked where they were, Alina had no answers. She just then twisted her wrists, searching for slack. Life teaches us that when darkness falls, we must keep fighting the very ties that bind us. Nessa whimpered in the dark, terribly small. Alina was terrified, but panic is a luxury the doomed cannot afford. The door groaned open. Marcus Kane walked down with 2 guards, offering a cynical apology for the room. He claimed he needed a secure spot to negotiate. Alina spat that Cassian would never bargain. Kane just smiled, pulling out his phone. He mocked that she was about to break a dangerous man's heart. Staring down the lens with defiance, Alina said she should have trusted Cassian. A guard's fist cracked across her face, filling her mouth with hot blood. Kane stopped recording, satisfied. He crouched down, offering a sympathetic look. It serves as a stark reminder. The most venomous cruelty is almost always delivered with a calm, polite smile. Kane's voice was smooth as glass. He swore his warnings were real. Loving Cassian was a death sentence. Then came the agonizing twist. Cassian never ordered the kidnapping. That was all Kane's manipulation. When Alina asked why he was confessing now, his answer was chilling. He wanted her to know the truth before she died. He knew Cassian would rush in, and Kane planned to slaughter them both and steal his empire. He called it ambition. Alina called it insanity. He walked away, telling her to make peace with her. The door slammed locked. Alone in the dark, Nessa begged to know what to do. Alina stared at the bare concrete and the single-barred window. No rescue. It is a heavy burden to carry, sometimes. The truth only reveals itself when it is far too late to rewrite your tragic ending. Left in the gloom, Alina was haunted by a sickening truth. Would walk Cash was straight into an ambush to save her. He would die, proving he was the man she wrongly doubted. Nessa's voice cracked, pleading for a plan. Alina closed her bruised eyes, remembering Cassian's gentle touch and the raw honesty of his love. She had foolishly believed a villain's lies over his devotion. Opening her eyes, a cold fire ignited in her chest. She told Nessa they would survive. But what if Cassian failed? Alina remembered holding a gun at the warehouse, the fierce recoil, the exact moment her innocence died. If he fails, she whispered, then we become the monsters ourselves. It reveals a dark truth of our nature. Trap a desperate soul in the shadows, and you leave them no choice but to bare their own teeth. Nessa stared through the dim light and nodded. Bound by rough ropes with death looming, Alina made a profound choice. She refused to die trembling. If Kane wanted her blood, he would have to earn every drop. The door groaned open, footsteps echoing on the concrete. Alina lifted her chin, locking eyes with Kane. Her stare held pure hatred and a violent promise. As she whispered, it was time for round 2. Kane smiled, a hollow look, and the nightmare resumed. Armed guards trailed him, eyeing the girls like cargo. Kane casually mused about how to truly break Cassian. Territory meant nothing. Alina was the piece he could never rebuild. Tasting blood in her mouth, Alina swore Cassian would kill him. It reminds us that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the absolute refusal to let it win. Kane crouched, studying Alina's bruised face with cold detachment. He whispered about Cassian's true weakness. It wasn't his rage, it was hope, the belief that love could outgun an army. Alina fiercely replied that love was enough. Kane let out a hollow laugh. If true, where was the rescue? 40 minutes had passed. No heroes kicking down doors. Just two bound girls waiting to die. Alina kept quiet. Behind her back, she twisted her bloody wrists, grinding raw flesh against the ropes to find a weak spot. Kane sighed, disappointed in the woman who supposedly made Cassian human again. He bragged about studying him for 5 years, mapping his every flaw. It is a painful reality. Our greatest strength, our capacity to hope, is exactly what a villain will weaponize against us. Kane was terribly smug. He knew Cassian was rallying his soldiers, ready to burn the city. Alina bravely claimed Kane had already lost, but his wicked smile only grew. Cassian's team was tracking a decoy signal, marching straight into a slaughterhouse. Kane promised Cassian would be dead before he even saw the trap. Nessa let out a broken whimper. They were nothing but bait. Kane reveled in his sick poetry. Cassian dies feeling like a failure. Alina dies drowning in guilt, and Kane steals the throne. Checking his watch, he turned his phone toward them. A live feed flickered on the screen. 3 black trucks tore into a warehouse lot, spilling Cassian's armed men. We often learn that the most devastating traps in life are the ones built entirely out of our deep love for another person. On the screen, Alina watched Ronan move with cold precision. The heavy doors swung open, revealing Cassian. His raw fury was undeniable. He marched forward, and suddenly, hell broke loose. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark from rooftops and parked cars. Cassian's crew scattered, returning fire, but it was a slaughter. Alina watched in horror as Cassian dove behind a truck, shooting back while his men dropped like stones. She begged the screen, sobbing for it to stop. Kane leaned in, ordering her to watch her lover bleed out for playing the hero. Agony forced a savage strength into Alina. She violently wrenched her tied wrists. The rope sliced deep, her warm blood acting as grease. Suddenly, the knot slipped a fraction. It is proof that sheer desperation can unlock survival strength we never knew we possessed. On the screen, Cassian was fighting, but his men were dropping fast. Then, he did something that stopped Alina's heart. He stepped out from cover, empty hands raised. His weapon dropped. Nessa gasped. Kane sneered, mocking the pointless surrender. Gunfire ceased as armed figures circled him. Cassian spoke unheard words. One of the men laughed and raised a rifle. A primal scream tore from Alina's throat. The phantom gunshot shattered her soul. She watched Cassian jerk backward and hit the pavement. Alina lost her mind, thrashing against her bloody ropes. Screaming curses, Kane pocketed his phone, declaring Cassian dead. Turning to his guards, he ordered them to clean up the loose ends. You and I know a dark truth. When you strip absolutely everything from someone, you don't break them. You forge a terrifying new nightmare. Let us rewind to that cold basement. A guard raised his weapon, aiming straight at Nessa. In that second, something inside Alina shattered like glass hitting concrete, leaving pieces that would never fit together again. With one agonizing twist, she wrenched her wrists. The rope snapped. Operating on pure, feral instinct, Alina hurled a jagged chunk of concrete at the gunman's face. It connected with a sickening crunch. His gun fired wildly into the ceiling. Alina did not stop. She threw her entire weight at Kane, crashing him into the floor. The second guard raised his weapon, but Alina whipped a dropped phone at his hand, sending his gun sliding into the shadows. "Move," she screamed. Nessa was completely frozen. Alina just grabbed her bound wrists and dragged her toward the stairs. Survival is never pretty, folks. It is just a desperate refusal to die. The bleeding guard lunged. Alina drove her foot right into his knee, feeling it give way. He went down, screaming. Dragging Nessa, They scrambled up the stairs while Kane roared orders from the dark. Footsteps echoed above. They reached the top, but the heavy door was deadlocked. She spotted a barred window near the ceiling, grabbed her jagged rock, and smashed it against the rusted iron. "They are coming," Nessa sobbed. Alina just swung harder until the bars snapped. Suddenly, cold hands clamped onto her from behind. Alina twisted violently, driving her elbow into his ribs. She spun to find Kane, blood pouring from his scalp. "You stupid bitch," he hissed. Alina leaned back and head-butted him right in the face. "Let me tell you folks, when your back is to the wall, pure survival makes a mighty fine teacher." The impact sent white-hot agony through her skull, probably breaking her nose, but Kane stumbled back. It bought her 3 precious seconds. Alina tore the final rusted bar free. "Go," she yelled. Alina shoved her frail sister upward. Nessa squeezed through the tiny opening, scraping her skin raw until she tumbled outside into the night. Before Alina could follow, heavy hands seized her ankles. She kicked out wildly, reaching for the ledge. Then a sickening thud rang out. A metal pipe cracked against her skull, and stars exploded across her vision. She collapsed to the concrete. Kane stood over her. "Impressive," he sneered. Alina pushed to her knees before a brutal kick dropped her again. She gasped, "Fred, you know the funny part?" Kane mocked. "Cassian is not dead. That video was old bait. It goes to show the cruelest traps are built on the things we love the most." Picture this, listeners. The cruelest words take the longest to sink in. When the truth finally hit Alina, it stole the breath from her lungs. "You lied," she gasped. Kane's hands were suddenly in her hair, yanking her head back with a violence that made the shadows tremble. He needed her broken, you see. He needed Cassian to witness her absolute devastation. "Now you help me end him," Kane whispered. "Never," she fired back, even as his men dragged her into the freezing Chicago night. They threw her into a van like discarded cargo. But here is a lesson we all learn about sacrifice. Physical pain means nothing when those we love are safe. Nessa was running free. That single thought was Alina's anchor as the van tore through the neon-lit streets, the world tilting violently. "Where are we going?" she managed to ask. "Navy Pier," Kane muttered, texting rapidly. "Cassian is tracking your phone. When he arrives, my men will be waiting," Kane promised, his voice stripped of all humanity. "This time he watches you die for real." Alina stared back at him, her chest burning with every jagged breath. "He is too smart for a simple trap," she told him. But Kane just offered a hollow, chilling smile. "Love, my friends, is a dangerous currency." As Kane said, "Love makes the smartest men blind. It makes them reckless. It gets them put in the ground." Alina stayed silent, cataloging the fire in her shattered ribs. She was still breathing. That was her only victory right now. Through the dark glass, Navy Pier loomed ahead, glowing with bright carnival lights and swarming with innocent tourists. Kane was planning a public execution. "You are completely insane," she breathed out. "No, I am efficient," he replied, his eyes dead and cold. He laid out his twisted terms. One scream, one wrong step, and he would sever her spine, forcing her to watch Cassian bleed out. She understood perfectly. Every step forward was pure agony. "You and I have both felt that terrifying weight of helplessness, haven't we?" Alina scanned the glowing pier, spotting at least 8 armed shadows waiting in the crowd. It was a flawless, terrible trap, and Cassian was walking blindly into the jaws of it. She could feel her phone heavy in her pocket, the one sliver of hope Kane's thugs had overlooked. If she could just reach it, if she could just send one word. But Kane forced her forward into a sea of laughing families and bright cotton candy. They stood by the cold iron railing, staring down at the endless black water of the lake. "Now we wait," Kane murmured. Alina's mind began to fracture. She could not fight, she could not run. But then, a dark, desperate thought bloomed in her chest. She could jump. The icy water was a 30-foot drop. It would freeze the life from her lungs in minutes. But sometimes, true strength means removing yourself from the board entirely, just so the ones you love have a chance to survive. She stared down at the black water, weighing her own life against Cassian's. But Kane was a man who understood the darkness in a human soul. "Do not even think about it," he whispered. "You jump, and I start executing tourists until he shows his face." The trap was locked. She closed her eyes, utterly defeated. But then a voice cut through the carnival noise. "Alina!" It was Nessa, tearing through the crowd, her face stained with desperate tears. And right behind her, Cassian. He stepped out of the shadow like a nightmare, brought to life, battered, bruised, but vibrating with a terrifying, absolute wrath. Ronan and Victor flanked him, armed to the teeth and ready for war. Kane flinched, genuinely shaken. "How?" he demanded. Cassian's voice was a dead, quiet thing. "Your sister is smarter than you thought. She found a phone." But Kane was a cornered animal now, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. Without hesitating, he jammed the steel barrel of his weapon straight against Alina's temple. "One more step, and she dies right here," Kane snarled. Cassian stopped dead. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. "Here is what happens now," Kane dictated, his voice trembling with sick power. "You get on your knees. You watch me end the woman you love, and then I take your empire." Cassian stood tall, a dying king facing his executioner. "That is not happening," he said. But Kane dug the cold steel deeper into Alina's skin. Slowly, painfully, Cassian sank to his knees on the concrete. "Cassian, no," Alina begged. He just looked at her, his dark eyes overflowing with a quiet, devastating acceptance. "It is going to be okay," he whispered. As Kane cocked the weapon, Alina stared at the man she loved. She poured every unspoken truth, every quiet morning they never got to share, right into that final look. And then she threw her entire body backward, slamming her skull into Kane's face. The gunshot shattered the night, the bullet screaming just inches from her ear. Before the shell even hit the ground, Cassian was already moving. Cassian crossed the gap like a force of pure, violent nature. Kane pushed Alina away, desperately swinging his weapon around. But Cassian was faster. A single shot rang out, biting deep into Kane's shoulder and spinning him around. Instantly, the pier erupted into absolute chaos. Gunfire echoed over the water. Screaming tourists scattered like ghosts in the neon light. Alina hit the concrete hard, her hands shielding her head until Ronan dragged her behind a steel pillar. Through the frantic smoke, she saw them, Cassian and Kane, tearing into each other with bare hands. Kane was bleeding, but desperation makes monsters out of men. He drove a brutal punch right into Cassian's shattered ribs. Cassian faltered, dropping to the ground in a gasp of agony. Kane snatched up his weapon, leveling it right at Cassian's brow. Without a single thought, Alina grabbed a heavy, broken iron pipe from the debris and swung it with all her might. It shattered across Kane's jaw. The gun fired into the dark sky, and Cassian swept the man's legs out from under him. "Let's pause here, you and I, because this is where the soul truly reveals itself." Cassian was on top of him instantly, his fists coming down with a terrifying, rhythmic fury. Every strike was a confession. "You touched her," he roared. "You made her think I was dead." His bloody hands clamped down hard around Kane's windpipe, ready to squeeze the life from him. But then, Alina's voice sliced through the thick fog of his rage. "Cassian, stop." He froze. His knuckles were white, trembling with the sheer desire to end it all. "He is not worth it," she pleaded softly. "Do not become a monster just for me." That is the hardest lesson in this life, knowing when to walk away from the vengeance you completely deserve. Slowly, Cassian let go. The distant wail of police sirens started cutting through the cold night air. He just stood there, staring at Alina as if she were a ghost that might vanish if he blinked. Then she ran to him, crashing into his chest so hard they both nearly collapsed, holding on as if the world itself was ending. He buried his face deep in her hair, breathing her in like oxygen. "I thought I lost you," Cassian choked out, his deep voice cracking under the weight of his fear. "I am here," she sobbed into his chest, her hands gripping his ruined shirt. "I am so sorry. I should have trusted you." He pulled back, his bruised hands gently framing her face. "We will talk about it all later," he whispered. "Right now, we have to run." The sirens were screaming down the avenue now. Ronan was already pushing Nessa into a dark, waiting sedan. Cassian grabbed Alina's hand, pulling her into the shadowy alleys. But the human body can only carry so much terror before it breaks. 2 blocks away, Alina's battered legs simply gave out. The sheer exhaustion crashed down on her like an ocean wave. Without missing a single beat, Cassian swept her up into his arms, holding her tightly against his beating heart. "I have got you," he promised into the dark. She buried her face in his neck. Finally letting go, they vanished into the quiet streets, heading for a safe house out in Evanston. Inside the dim, quiet safe house, Cassian lowered her onto the couch like she was made of fragile glass. Ronan walked in right behind them, cracking open a heavy medical kit. "You are both badly hurt," Ronan stated. "I am fine," Alina whispered, a brave but obvious lie. Cassian knelt before her, his hands trembling slightly as he checked her wounds. "You have broken ribs, a concussion, and 100 cuts." "You are not fine," he murmured. She touched his bruised cheek. "Neither are you." He brushed it off, ordering Ronan to check on Nessa first. Let's reflect on this, listeners. The profound beauty of survival isn't the absence of pain, it's the quiet aftermath shared with someone you love. Cassian sat beside Alina, slowly lacing his scarred fingers through hers. "I saw the video," he finally confessed, his voice hollow. "Kane sent it everywhere. I knew it was a trap. I knew he wanted me to come running in blind and angry." His grip tightened around her hand, his eyes shining in the low light. "But I did it anyway, because a life without you isn't a life at all." Cassian's voice drifted back to the quiet room. If you had not fired, I would have walked right into his ambush. I was blinded by rage. I almost got you killed," she whispered. "No," he corrected. "You saved my life." Alina turned to face him. "Cassian, I thought you were dead. Kane showed a video taking a bullet. I thought I would never get to apologize for believing his lies." "You had every reason to doubt me," Cassian murmured, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "I kept secrets. I made you a target just by caring about you." "You tried to protect me," she said, leaning into his touch. "I failed," he replied bitterly. "You did not," she insisted. "You proved every word he said was poison, so she laid it all bare. The doctored photos, the lies, the dark accusations. Because in the end, my friends, the only real cure for poisonous lies is the absolute unflinching truth." Picture the scene, listeners. A dimly lit room, the air heavy with the scent of old blood and exhausted tears. Cassian stood there, his jaw locked tight as the truth settled into his bones. "Son of a bitch," he breathed out, realizing he had been played. He reached out, his thumb lightly tracing her cheekbone, careful of her bruised skin. "You did what anyone would do," he murmured. "You protected your blood." He saw the sheer terror she had lived through, all because she thought he was the monster. Here is the thing we often forget. Survival isn't betrayal, it's just survival. Alina's eyes welled up. "I love you," she whispered, a confession torn from her bruised throat. He kissed her, soft and completely devastating, resting his forehead against hers. "I have loved you since the moment you looked at me, like I was a good man. I will love you until the dirt takes me," Cassian vowed, his hands framing her tired face like a sacred artifact. "And I am getting out all of it." He spoke of leaving his territory, walking away from the empire of blood he built from the gutter up. "You cannot just walk away," she told him, but his eyes were a burning wildfire. None of his power mattered if she was bleeding. He built his throne so he would never be helpless again, yet watching her suffer on that basement video tore him apart worse than his own tragic childhood. We build walls to keep the pain out, friends, but sometimes those walls just trap the people we love inside. "My men will understand, or they will not," he whispered, pressing his lips to hers. "You are my empire now. You and Nessa. The rest is just static." Across the dim room, Ronan stepped out of the shadows. He had checked on her sister, bruised but breathing. Then Ronan turned his hard gaze to Cassian. "We need to talk about Kane." The name alone sucked the warmth from the room. The police had him, but money talks, and bail was already in motion. "Not if he is dead," Cassian growled, the raw murder returning to his eyes. This man had dragged the woman he loved into the dark and threatened to erase her. But Ronan pushed back. Killing Kane meant the federal agencies would hunt Cassian to the ends of the earth. He would never give Alina the peace he just promised. Here is a hard truth you and I have to face tonight. True strength isn't in pulling the trigger, it is knowing when to drop the gun. Kane made mistakes tonight, Ronan warned, his voice steady against the storm in Cassian's chest. Federal charges. He is looking at 20 years minimum. Let the system bury him. Cassian stood paralyzed between two different lives. One path offered the quick, bloody revenge his wounded soul screamed for. The other was a quiet, normal life with Alina. You can almost feel the agonizing weight tearing him in half. "Please," Alina begged softly. "No more killing. I just want it to be over. It is the hardest choice a person can make. Letting go of righteous anger for the sake of a peaceful tomorrow." Slowly, the fight drained from Cassian's shoulders. He nodded. "We do it your way," he conceded, pulling Alina into his arms. Whole, alive, and finally his. The house sank into a heavy, restless silence. Alina pressed her face to Cassian's chest, listening to the steady drum of his heart. "I cannot sleep," she whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I see you getting shot." Cassian tightened his grip, wrapping her in absolute safety. "I am not going anywhere, I promise." He kissed her hair, promising a future away from cold basements and loaded weapons. "But trauma has a way of lingering in the shadows, doesn't it?" "What if we cannot escape?" she asked. "What if this violence is who we are?" Cassian pulled back, his dark eyes locking onto hers. They would face it together. A family built on survival, refusing to let the dark win. Love is not about erasing the past. It is about choosing to walk through the dark hand in hand. "When this is over," Alina murmured, cutting through the midnight quiet, "I want to marry you." Cass froze. This hardened man, who had stared down loaded guns without blinking, was completely undone. "I want to wake up next to you," she said, her voice raw. "Not because we are running, but because I choose you." He held her face like fragile glass, warning her he was a broken man to love. She smiled through her tears. "Good thing I am not easy to scare." His kiss was deep and full of promises. Sometimes, the greatest act of rebellion in a cruel world is daring to build a life of joy. "Yes," he rasped, his eyes shining. To all of it, they fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, letting hope finally win the night. Hours later, the harsh buzz of a phone shattered their fragile peace. Alina fumbled in the dark. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and her blood turned to ice. "You think it is over. It is not. I am coming for all of you. Kane." Her heart hammered against her bruised ribs. How did a man in lockup send a message? Before she could wake Cassian, the phone rang. She answered, a purple Mitska born of pure panic. "Where are you?" she demanded. Kane's voice crawled through the speaker, unhinged and dripping with venom. She tried to be brave, reminding him he was behind bars, but his chilling laughter filled the room. "We think we can lock away our nightmares, but evil rarely stays buried. Am I?" Kane sneered, his voice ablaze in the dark. "Check the news, sweetheart." The line went dead, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Alina's hands trembled violently as she opened the news app. The page loaded with agonizing slowness. Then the headline appeared like a judge's final sentence. "High-profile suspect, Marcus Kane escapes. Manhunt underway." The phone slipped from her numb fingers. Cassian was awake in a heartbeat, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon. Alina could not even speak. She just pointed at the glowing screen. Cassian's face turned to cold, unfeeling stone. "Get your sister," he ordered quietly. "We are leaving now." The illusion of safety was completely shattered. Life reminds us constantly that peace is never free. It must be fought for. Alina bolted upstairs, her ribs screaming in pain, finding Nessa already awake and utterly terrified. Picture this, you and I, stepping into a world about to shatter. Alina hauled her sister up, panic vibrating in her bones. Downstairs, Cassian barked his final orders into the phone. "How much time?" Alina pleaded. His eyes were hollow, maybe hours, maybe minutes. A plane waited 40 minutes away, but then glass exploded. Gunfire tore through the quiet. Cassian pushed Alina and Nessa away. "Get to the car," he ordered, stepping into the bullets with a deadly, heartbreaking calm. Ronan dragged the women into the bitter night. Alina looked back just in time to see a bullet tear into Cassian's shoulder. He stumbled but kept firing. "Get in!" Victor yelled from the running car. Alina froze. Sometimes, walking away to save yourself is the most agonizing choice a human heart can make. Every fiber of her soul screamed to run back to him. Then, an explosion rocked the foundation. Flames clawed from the windows, the shockwave knocking Alina down. Ronan threw her into the car as Victor slammed the gas. As they tore away, Alina twisted around in desperate terror. The door blew open. Cassian emerged, drenched in blood, limping through the soot. Behind him, killers poured from the inferno. He would never reach them. "Stop!" Alina screamed. "Victor, stop the car." "Boss's orders," Victor replied coldly. "I don't care," she sobbed. But the distance stretched like an open wound. Alina watched helplessly as Cassian dropped 2 men before his weapon clicked empty. It is a terrible truth that true love often demands the heaviest sacrifices we can ever bear. Kane's men flooded the street, weapons drawn. Alina clawed at the car door. Ronan grabbed, but she bit his hand hard. He recoiled, and she threw herself from the moving vehicle. She hit the asphalt, agony flaring through her broken ribs, but she forced herself up. She stumbled toward Cassian, toward the crossfire. He saw to her, his eyes fracturing with pure horror. But she kept running. If he was dying tonight, he wasn't dying alone. Behind her, Nessa screamed. Ahead, the executioners took aim. Time slowed. She saw the muzzle flashes, and Cassian's face twisted with desperate love. You and I both know the truth about real devotion. It never calculates the odds. It just runs straight into the dark, willing to burn. The gunfire was a deafening wave. They were going to die here. Suddenly, the chaos broke. Victor whipped the car around in a brutal slide, roaring back to help. He and Ronan unleashed a storm of cover fire. Alina dove between two cars as bullets chewed the air behind her. She tasted blood and dirt. Then, Cassian was there, shielding her with his body. "What were you thinking?" he snarled. "That you weren't dying alone." He gripped her hand. "You beautiful fool. Can you run?" She nodded. They moved like ghosts through the smoke, using vehicles as shields, while their crew bought them seconds. Behind them, Kane's men were already regrouping. More headlights pierced the dark. "Listen to me. Sometimes survival is just outrunning the Reaper by a single, agonizing step." The approaching headlights made Alina's blood run cold. Cassian knew it too. He pinned her against a van, framing her face with his hands. "Listen to me." His voice was heavy with finality. "When Victor pulls up, you get in. Take Nessa and disappear." "I am not leaving you," she cried. "You have to," he insisted. "I need you to live." His thumb brushed her cheek. It's a terrifying thing, watching someone make peace with their end. He kissed her, a desperate mix of blood, smoke, and goodbye. He pulled back, eyes like steel. "I love you. Remember that." Then he stepped into the open, weapon raised, pulling the crossfire onto himself. Alina watched in paralyzed horror as the man she loved walked into the jaws of death, engaging 3 shooters at once. Cassian dropped 2 men in rapid succession, but a third bullet caught his side. He stumbled, refusing to drop. The car shrieked to a halt beside Alina. "Get in!" Ronan yelled. She froze, watching Cassian draw the crossfire. "Alina," Nessa sobbed. Through the smoke, Cassian locked eyes with her. "Go," he mouthed. That silent plea broke her paralysis. She climbed in as Victor slammed the gas. Twisting in her seat, Alina watched through the rear glass. Cassian was trailing blood, limping toward an alley. Then the nightmare took shape. Marcus Kane stepped from the darkness directly behind him. "Stop the car!" Alina screamed. Victor hesitated. Without thinking, she lunged forward, violently wrenching the steering wheel. The tires shrieked as the vehicle spun, completely out of control. Headlights flooded the street like a grim stage, and there he was, Kane. The man who had pulled a young Cassian from the gutter, the only father he ever knew, now had a gun pressed to his boy's skull. Cassian knelt, bleeding out. "Turn off the engine," Kane barked. "Get out or I execute him." "Don't," Cassian grunted. "Drive away." But Alina was already opening her door. Not happening. She slipped out, hands raised, stepping into the glaring beams. "Let him go," she demanded. "You want leverage? Take me." Kane's smile was a grotesque mask of matted blood and swollen flesh. He looked at the protégé he molded, then at the woman who ruined it all. "You don't negotiate," Kane hissed, his voice thick with a twisted, toxic grief. "You cost me my empire. You cost me my future." "I take everything from you," Kane whispered. The hammer clicked. Cassian closed his eyes. In that moment, Alina's mind turned to pure ice. She thought of the past 8 months, uncovering the loyal soul beneath Cassian's ruthless mask. Then, her focus locked onto the small pistol, tucked at the small of her back. The one Ronan gave her 3 days ago, the weapon everyone forgot. "You and I know that when the abyss stares back, you cannot blink." "You are right," she told Kane, taking a slow step forward. "You should take everything." Another step. Kane's attention wavered, split between the boy he raised and the woman approaching. "I destroyed your life," she continued, her voice unnervingly calm despite her hammering chest. "I should pay." She was 15 feet away, close enough. "Here is my offer," she said smoothly. "My life for his. Let them go and take me." "Alina, no." Cassian choked out, his eyes wild with fear. She looked at him, memorizing his face. "It is okay. This is my choice." Kane let out a cruel laugh. How touching. But I want you to watch him die first. I want you to carry that agony. Then you are making a mistake, Alina said. Her hand moved with terrifying speed. The pistol cleared her waistband. Kane's eyes bulged. He tried to pivot his weapon, but Cassian was already moving. Even bleeding out, the protégé was lethal. He drove his elbow viciously into his old mentor's knee. The joint buckled. The barrel jerked away from his skull. Alina pulled the trigger. The crack echoed across the wet asphalt as the bullet tore deep into Kane's chest. Kane stumbled backward. Cassian snatched his weapon from the pavement and put 2 final rounds into the man who raised him. Kane hit the ground. Cassian stood on shaking legs, looming over his dying mentor. "You should have taken the deal," Cassian whispered. Kane coughed, dark blood bubbling. "You will never be free of this." "Maybe not," Cassian replied, "but I will be free of you." Kane's eyes went glassy. Then silence. Only the wail of sirens cut the night. There is no victory in burying the man who built you, only sheer survival. Suddenly, Cassian's legs gave out. Alina caught him as they collapsed to the wet asphalt. Hot blood soaked her trembling hands. "Stay with me," she begged, her voice shattering. He squeezed her fingers weakly. "Just a flesh wound," he rasped, dramatic, but not fatal. "You shot him," Cassian breathed. "I shot him," Alina cried. "Good aim. I was aiming for his head." A pained chuckle left his chest. "Remind me never to make you angry." Ronin dropped beside them, pressing his wounds, shouting for medics. "He is alive," Alina wept. "He has to be." Cassian squeezed her hand, his voice a whisper. "Made a promise." "What promise?" "Marry you, build a life." His heavy eyes fluttered. "Can't do that if I am dead." "Then do not die," Alina commanded. Paramedics rushed in, loading his bleeding frame onto a stretcher. Alina moved to climb into the back, but a medic blocked her. "Family only." "I am his fiancée," she snapped without a second thought. "You and I both know sometimes a desperate lie in the dark is just a truth waiting to be born. Or maybe it was never a lie to begin with. Maybe it was just the heavy truth of the inevitable finally catching up to them." The paramedic took one long look at Alina's blood-soaked clothes and her battered face, giving a grim nod. The ride to the emergency room was a terrifying blur of flashing lights and piercing sirens. She clung to Cassian's cold hand, watching those hospital monitors blink in a language she could not speak. "Stay with me," she begged into the suffocating quiet. "Always," he whispered back, his voice breaking. "Said I was yours, and I meant it." They tore him away the second the doors flew open. Alina just sank into a hard plastic chair in the waiting room, shaking uncontrollably as Nessa held her. Life has a funny way of stripping us down to our rawest parts when we are terrified of losing someone we love. You and I know that the hardest part of any tragedy is the waiting. Hours bled into one another in that sterile room. Ronin paced the floor, murmuring urgent commands into his phone, while Victor stood like a stone sentinel at the door, half expecting Kane's ghost to step through the shadows. Exhaustion finally dragged Alina under. She dreamed of dark basements and the deafening crack of gunfire, waking to the morning sun and Ronin gently shaking her shoulder. "He is out," Ronin told her quietly. "He wants you." They said he got lucky. Lucky. She almost laughed at the bitter irony of the word. Down the bright, lifeless corridor, she found him propped up in a hospital bed. He looked like a man who had shaken hands with death and walked away, his eyes lighting up the moment she walked into the room. His voice was rough, scraping against his throat from the breathing tube. "You look terrible," she whispered, taking his bruised hand. "You should see the other guy," he managed to joke, before the room grew heavy. "You pulled the trigger," he said softly. "How does that sit with you?" She did not even have to search her soul for the answer. I would do it 100 times over to protect you, she told him. He stroked her wrist, relieved that the poison of guilt would not consume her. You came back for me, he murmured, his eyes locking onto hers. You could have walked away. Of course I came back, she replied. I love you. He pulled her close, the scent of antiseptic giving way to the warmth of his skin. I am done, he confessed into the quiet space between them. I am selling the empire. We are disappearing. Sometimes, letting go of power is the only way to hold on to peace. Just you, me, and Nessa, he promised her. Somewhere quiet, somewhere the shadows cannot reach. He explained that Ronin would take the crown, an easy transition for the underworld they were leaving behind. Cassian's jaw tightened with the exhaustion of a man who had carried a war for far too long. I want normal, Alina. I want boring. I want to wake up without looking for the nearest exit. Alina kissed him tenderly. You are the greatest choice I ever made, she whispered. The best mistake that turned into my salvation. The hospital door creaked open, and Nessa stood lingering on the threshold, unsure if she was welcome. True family, you see, is never about the blood in your veins. It is about who stays in the room when the fire burns hottest. Thank you, Nessa choked out, her voice shattering in the quiet room. For saving me, for protecting my sister. Cassian looked at her, his expression stripping away the ruthless crime boss and leaving only a fiercely loyal protector. You are her sister, he told her plainly. That makes you worth fighting for. Nessa moved to his bedside, tears freely falling now, apologizing for ever doubting the man who had ultimately bled for them. Cassian simply squeezed her hand. You were thrown into a nightmare that made no sense, he said. But we are past the dark now. This is a fresh start for all of us. Nessa wiped her cheeks, a small smile breaking through the grief. So, where is this mysterious safe haven? Cassian turned his eyes to Alina. The absolute best parts of our lives always begin the moment we finally stop running from our past and start choosing our future. Somewhere warm, Alina whispered, her mind painting a picture of a life she never dared to imagine. Somewhere we can watch the ocean, where Nessa can just be a normal college student. Cassian knew exactly the place, a quiet, nameless stretch of the Carolina coast, a house he had kept hidden for the day the sky finally fell. No more looking back, he promised her. 6 months later, the violent echoes of the city were nothing but fading memories. Alina stood barefoot on a South Carolina beach, the warm sand grounding her while the salty wind swept through her hair. The house behind them was not a sprawling penthouse. It was weathered, imperfect, and absolutely theirs. Cassian walked out onto the deck carrying 2 glasses of wine, moving with an easy grace. Healing does not mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls your life. He wore a simple faded shirt and jeans, miles away from the tailored armor he used to wear in the criminal underworld. Nessa is on the phone talking about coral reefs, he laughed, handing Alina her glass. I understood maybe 30% of it, but she loves it. Alina leaned against his chest, quietly thanking him for paying her sister's tuition. She is family, Cassian murmured, kissing the crown of her head. That is what family does. They stood there in the heavy, beautiful silence of a life finally at peace. Alina thought about the terrified woman she had been 6 months ago, hiding in a closet while her world burned down. That world had to burn so this one could be built. I went to the jeweler today, Cassian said casually. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, revealing a single diamond that caught the dying sunlight. Peace is the ultimate luxury. I know we said we would wait, Cassian began, his deep voice trembling with a vulnerability he saved only for her. But I have been sure of this. Since the night you fired a weapon to keep me breathing, will you marry me? Not because we are running, but because I want to spend my life making you happy. Alina's eyes welled with tears as she laughed, a sound of pure joy. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the platinum ring onto her finger, and of course it was a perfect fit. He rested his forehead against hers as the sky erupted in brilliant shades of gold and fire. I never thought I deserved this, he confessed into the twilight. A home, peace. His hands gently framed her face. You saved me, Alina. You looked at me like I was worth keeping. True redemption does not come from punishing ourselves. It comes from allowing someone else to love the darkest parts of our soul. You and I both know the truth about saving someone. You just reminded me how we saved each other. She smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his eyes. They walked back up to the house, their hands intertwined, a quiet promise locked between their fingers. Through the glowing window, they could see Nessa at the kitchen table, safe, radiant, and fully alive. Think she will forgive us for a quiet beach wedding? He asked softly. They walked inside, and the moment Nessa spotted the diamond catching the kitchen light, she dropped her video call entirely. My sister just got engaged, she practically screamed, throwing her arms around Alina in a messy, tearful embrace. Laughter filled the small house, rich and unbroken. At the end of every bitter storm, if you hold on just long enough, the universe always finds a way to lead you back to the light. Nessa held Alina's hand, tracing the edges of the diamond. Cassian, you have good taste, she whispered. I have excellent taste, he corrected softly. I chose your sister, didn't I? Nessa smiled through the lingering shadows. I am so happy for you, she said. You walked through absolute hell, and you came out the other side together. That means everything, Alina replied. They spent the evening planning a quiet sunset ceremony on the beach. When Nessa asked about Ronan, Cassian shook his head. Ronan had to hold the empire in Chicago, safer that way. Later, in the heavy quiet of the night, Alina asked if he missed the power. Cassian fell silent. Sometimes, he confessed, I think about the violent world I built. Letting go of who we used to be is never easy, even when it finally saves our soul. I think about what I walked away from, Cassian murmured. But then I look at you, and I remember why I left. He stared at the dark ocean. This is worth more than any empire. No regrets. I only wish I had done it sooner. He pulled her against his chest. I should have walked away the day I found you crying in the dark. I should have known you were the most important thing I would ever hold. You were not ready then, Alina whispered. Maybe not, he agreed, kissing her softly. But I am ready now. 3 weeks later, under a bleeding sunset, they stood barefoot in the sand. They exchanged vows born from absolute survival, promised to choose each other every single day. They built something beautiful from the ashes, a quiet reminder that genuine love can outlast even the cruelest storms. Cassian kissed her like they were the last two souls on earth. Stick with me here, because this is where their dark night finally breaks. That beach became a safe universe. Later, with the windows open to the ocean, Alina rested her head over his steady heartbeat. I am pregnant, she whispered. Cassian turned to stone. What? 8 weeks, she confessed. I wanted to wait, but I cannot keep secrets from you anymore. Silence hung heavy before his scarred hand moved, resting gently over her stomach. You sure? He asked, his deep voice cracking with raw vulnerability. 3 positive tests. He asked how she felt. Alina realized she felt everything. Terrified, overjoyed, and completely alive. Letting someone see your deepest fears and highest hopes is truly the bravest thing a person can do. She covered his trembling hand. How do you feel? Like I am going to be a father, Cassian whispered, wonder thick in his throat. Like maybe this is what redemption looks like. You do not need redemption, she told him. But he knew better. Our kid needs parents who will protect them from the cold reality we survived, he promised, as the months drifted by. The hard edges of Cassian's soul melted away. The bitter vigilance of his past faded. He spent quiet hours building nursery furniture with the very same scarred hands that used to destroy. He laughed more. He softened. He became the gentle man Alina knew was buried beneath all that armor. Sometimes, when we finally lay down our heavy weapons, we make room for the beautiful quiet peace we were always meant to find. You and I both know the past never really stops calling, but sometimes it calls just to say goodbye. Ronan checked in from Chicago once a month. The transition was clean. No one was hunting them. You really did it, Ronan said. You got out. We got out, Cassian corrected, watching Alina across the room. How is the quiet life? Better than I deserve, Cassian murmured. After hanging up, he walked over to Alina, his hand instinctively finding the swell of her stomach. Still kicking? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. I think we have a fighter on our hands. Either way, they are going to be extraordinary. They are going to be loved, Alina replied softly, because in the end it does not matter how tough the world is. Being unconditionally loved is the only armor that truly protects us. The weight broke on a quiet Tuesday morning. By noon, the pain was a screaming reality. Cassian drove to the hospital, knuckles white on the wheel, failing spectacularly to stay calm. Breathe, he chanted. I'm breathing, Alina gasped. 14 grueling hours later, in the dead of night, their daughter entered the world. She arrived screaming and impossibly small. When she rested on Alina's chest, all the violent years and terror dissolved into nothing. Cassian stood by the bed, tears cutting tracks down his face, staring at his child as if she had fallen from the stars. She is perfect, he choked out. When the nurse asked for a name, Alina looked deep into Cassian's eyes. Hope, Alina whispered softly. No matter how dark your past journey gets, true hope is the only force that can conquer fear. Her name was Hope. She was living proof that broken souls could build something whole. Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we? Cassian gathered his tiny daughter into his scarred arms with a gentleness that defied his brutal past. Hello, Hope, he murmured, his deep voice trembling. I have done terrible things. But I swear to you, I will spend my last breath making sure you never have to be afraid. You will have everything we were denied, safety, a childhood free from pain. Alina held his hand, tears in her eyes. We are going to give her a true home. And they did, because breaking a dark cycle of trauma is the absolute greatest victory any of us can ever achieve. 6 months later, Alina woke to the quiet dawn, finding Cassian out on the porch, holding their beautiful future in his arms. The morning broke in soft pinks and gold, the ocean breathing quietly beneath the rising sun. Alina stepped out, wrapping her arms around Cassian's waist. He was holding their sleeping child, Hope, a living testament to the nightmare they outlived. What are you thinking about? She asked. The closet, he replied softly. 8 months of denying himself, until he found her crying and his whole world shifted. Alina leaned against him. Even knowing the absolute terror they would face, she would open that door again. She would fall in love again. It is a beautiful lesson for us tonight. The greatest things in life are not born from circumstance, but from conscious choice. No regrets, he whispered, kissing her cheek. Every day, we choose this. That is what makes it real. Little Hope stirred in the dark. Cassian rocked her, a man who survived hell now holding his only peace. Alina watched, her heart laid bare. I love you, she whispered. I don't say it enough. Cassian looked up, his eyes heavy with their brutal past. You say it every time you trust me with our daughter, he replied. Every time you choose to stay. Dawn broke over the ocean, washing over a family forged from impossible choices. The ghosts of that Chicago closet were finally buried. Fast forward 3 years, Nessa crosses a stage for her marine biology degree. While a toddler Hope claps wildly in the crowd, you and I know life rarely gives out second chances. But sometimes, if you endure the longest nights, your broken pieces finally build something beautiful. 5 years down the road, a boy named Thomas arrived, carrying Alina's dark hair and Cassian's stubborn chin. By year 7, Cassian cut the final cord, selling off his last piece of the Chicago underworld to protect his family's future. At the 10-year mark, they stood on that same quiet beach. Nessa guided the ceremony while their children proudly watched. 10 years since I found you weeping in my closet, Cassian told her, his voice heavy. I would take every single bullet and scar all over again just to end up right here. Alina held his rough hands, her words drifting over the ocean breeze. You taught me that monsters can become fathers, and maybe you and I can take a simple lesson from them. No matter how dark your history might be, love is a daily choice. Alina traced his scarred face, promising forever with no regrets. Their children cheered, voices blending with the crashing waves. Later that night, with the house wrapped in peaceful silence, they sat on the dimly lit porch. Do you ever miss the power? Alina asked gently. Cassian let the quiet night breathe before speaking. He missed the certainty of the dark, but that old version of himself was utterly alone. Pulling her against his chest, he whispered, This version gets to wake up beside you. I get to be human. We face the hard days together, and there is a beautiful lesson hidden in his quiet admission. True strength is rarely found in the cold, brutal empires we conquer. It is found entirely in the simple, fragile lives we dare to build with the ones we deeply love. Cassian stared at the black ocean, feeling the years wash away. He glanced at the house where their children slept, miles away from the blood and terror. Yeah, he finally murmured, I think we made it. Under that midnight sky, the former crime lord finally tasted the peace he had bled for. Years later, Alina told her daughter the story. She spoke of a dangerous man who traded an empire for love, and a quiet woman who found courage in the shadows. She told her about that closet, the exact moment two ruined souls recognized each other. And you know, there is a profound wisdom in their journey that speaks directly to us. No matter how deep your scars run, the greatest redemption you can ever achieve is simply allowing yourself to be truly seen. You and I know that real love is rarely a fairy tale. Hope called their history romantic, but Alina knew it was a beautiful disaster. Cassian stepped into the fading light, setting young Thomas down. The closet story, he murmured. His heavy gaze found Alina, remembering the shattered woman who once collapsed in the dark. She was the bravest soul, he told the kids. She let a dangerous man pull her from the abyss. He confessed her daily choice to trust him was true bravery. Alina met his eyes, her voice unshakable. You are worth loving, she told him. They sat together in the twilight, a family forged from impossible choices. The lesson here is simple. Even when life breaks you down to absolutely nothing, love can rebuild the pieces. The terrified girl she used to be could never imagine giving her heart to the lethal man who found her weeping. She never dreamed of a bond that survived every brutal tragedy hurled their way. Yet here they stood, two shattered souls finding salvation, a monster made human by a woman who refused to let go. Cassian wrapped his scarred arms around her, While the distant ocean sang its endless song, Alina realized a profound truth in that embrace. The agonizing day she fell apart in the dark was not her ending. It was the door to her future. We often think our lowest moments will destroy us, but sometimes hitting rock bottom is the only way to finally rise and claim the beautiful life we truly deserve. By the later part of the story, Alina is no longer the same woman who quietly answered calls at Cassian's desk. She has faced kidnapping, betrayal, violence, emotional confusion, and the fear of losing everyone she loves. She has fired a weapon, confronted powerful men, and chosen not to die helplessly in Kane's basement. One of the most meaningful lessons here is that survival changes people. As we want healing, to mean returning to who we were before the trauma. But the story suggests something deeper. Sometimes survival reveals versions we never knew existed. Alina does not let go. She becomes stronger. She becomes more aware. She learns being kind does not mean being passive. Being loving does not mean being naive. Being afraid does not mean being weak. She discovers that she can protect, fight, question, and still love. This is an important educational message for viewers. Many people feel guilty after surviving traumatic experiences because they are no longer the same. They may become more guarded, more assertive, less trusting, or more intense. But change is not always damage. Sometimes change is adaptation. Sometimes it is the mind and heart learning how to survive a world that was more dangerous than expected. Nessa also plays a key role in this lesson. At first, she struggles to recognize the sister Alina has become. She sees the danger, the gun, the relationship with Cassian, and she feels afraid. But later, she understands that Alina's transformation may not be a loss. It may be what was necessary for both of them to survive. This journey mirrors this. But Alina sees more than his violence. She sees his loyalty, his pain, and his desire to protect. The story does not judge us. Can still show love and responsibility while carrying scars. For viewers, the final lesson is powerful. We are not only shaped by what happens to us, we are also shaped by what we choose afterward. Drama can harden people, but it can also clarify what matters. It can show us who is loyal, who is false, and who we become when everything comfortable is stripped away. Alina's story teaches that survival is not just staying alive. Survival is learning to stand again, choose again, trust again, and love with open eyes. She does not return to her old life untouched. She becomes someone strong, wiser, and more honest about what love and danger truly cost.